Before we get into the how-to, here's a quick primer on what is Bokashi composting. Bokashi is a Japanese word meaning fermented organic matter. It's important to start here because, as author Rebecca Louie points out in her excellent book, Composted, Bokashi is the process of fermenting your food scraps versus complete composting. What you get from the Bokashi process is better thought of as pre-compost or a soil amendment. To complete the process, and in fact create garden-ready compost, the Bokashi fermented scraps need to be added to a soil ecosystem. From there, the now aerobic, with oxygen, process and soil ecosystem takes care of creating the compost that we're looking for. So, Bokashi composting happens in 2 steps after you collect your food scraps, of course. So, number 1, you ferment your food scraps to create pre-compost. Number 2, we add that pre-compost to a soil ecosystem or an existing compost system to become nutritionally available for plant life. Bokashi is an anaerobic process, meaning that it happens without oxygen. That's why it's important to compress our food scraps that we add to our bins to reduce our air pockets, and make sure that our bins are always sealed airtight after we add anything to them. To be clear, Bokashi composting is about processing your kitchen food waste, not yard or landscape debris. Although processing your food waste with Bokashi and composting your yard debris can work together in the same system, which we'll talk more about later. So let's kick off the how-to by introducing what can and can't be composted with Bokashi. This is one of the best parts of Bokashi composting. You think far less about what you can or can't compost. So what can be composted with Bokashi? Anything you normally compost, like fruit peels, vegetable scraps, or whatever, but as well meat, dairy, prepared oily foods. Just make sure to layer in some browns like cardboard, paper towels, just to lessen the amount of oil or liquid that you add all at once if you're adding a lot. You can also Bokashi compost bones or even compostable plastics, but be sure to shred those up or break those down a bit before adding them in. What you can't Bokashi compost? Well, already rotten foods. You can add these to Bokashi, but too much at once should be avoided. Yard or garden debris. You can compost these with Bokashi. This is more so a space issue for your bin or your buckets. On to our equipment we need. Okay, first the Bokashi bin or a 5-gallon bucket, which is the cheaper of the 2 options. For a premium Bokashi bin, I recommend the 2.5-gallon Organico bin, which comes in at around $90. However, I started with multiple 5-gallon buckets that I bought at Home Depot and Lowe's. Still have one right here that is in progress, and I think that's a great way to get started. It's cheaper to get started that way, and with enough time you'll also see the benefit to the upgraded bin, as I did. But that being said, my buckets are still a major part of the whole system just because they can hold so much. They can hold 2 times the amount of this Organico here. So for a family event or a big fridge clean out, I'll still opt to fill up a bucket versus the Organico. The key here, whether you choose a premium Bokashi bin or a 5-gallon bucket, is just to make sure that it seals airtight. Next, Bokashi brand. So there are a lot of Bokashi brands to choose from, but for some time I've started to use the Bokashi brand that came with the Organico bin. I believe they give you maybe a pound of this brand when you first buy a bin, and it's been great, it's been effective, it's done the job. This is Terraganics Bokashi brand. The more you buy of this at once, the better deal you will get. So I refill myself with 22 pounds at a time. You can see the size of this bucket here. Next, so the Organico makes this unnecessary as it comes with a seal that you can use every time you add food scraps, but with the 5-gallon bucket system, I would recommend having a tamper of some kind. I've used a hand cultivator for a long time that I got at Home Depot for 15 bucks or something, just to make things a little bit less messy and make sure that we're reducing the air pockets as we add more scraps. Also, you'll need a countertop compost caddy if using the 5-gallon bucket system. Again, the Organco eliminates the need for an additional caddy because it can just sit right on your countertop. And I've used a stainless steel caddy myself with compost liner bags. I found these from Hold On, which have been great. These liner bags are pretty notorious for just ripping to shreds the minute that you try to unfold them and put them into your caddy. So that helps keep any cleanup to a minimum. And lastly, not pictured here, you'll need a shovel for digging some holes and burying your food scraps, and some yard and garden space. Let's go ahead and get into the how-to. Okay, here's the step-by-step to Bokashi composting. So there's two variations. One if you're using the normal 5-gallon bucket, another if you're using a premium bin like the Organco that comes with a spout. Either way, both variations start with adding your food scraps, and I have some sample scraps here. Nothing crazy, some watermelon rinds, some banana peels, eggshells, our 1-year-old son's leftover breakfast. All this can go in with the Bokashi system. So step one, let's add these food scraps. So add your food scraps to your Organco bin, a premium compost bin, each time by adding a light dusting of the Bokashi brand on top of the food scraps. If you're starting a new bin, like I'm doing here, I'd recommend adding some bran on the bottom before you get started. And then go ahead and add some of your scraps in. Normally, I'm not adding all of these in such a large quantity with the Organco because this is really happening just in the pace of the day, or sometimes in larger quantities when, you know, we're preparing dinner or something like that. But each time, go ahead and add in a light dusting of scraps, very simply. Obviously, you still have a lot more here, but then you're going to use the sealer, as is the case with the Organco, or whatever you're going to use, whether it's a normal bin, and get as much air out of that as possible and compress those scraps down. This creates the seal and makes things as airtight as we possibly can get it. With the 5-gallon bucket, things will be slightly different, right? You'll be using your countertop caddy with no bran added each time, just normal additions to your countertop caddy. And once that fills up, you then add this entire quantity to your bucket. So if this is an empty bucket, an empty 5-gallon bucket, start by adding a layer of cardboard, paper towels, or anything that will soak up extra moisture in the bucket as we go, because you won't have the spout here like the Organco to remove that liquid. Then add an initial layer of Bokashi bran on top of that cardboard before adding food. And with that 5-gallon bucket, since you're adding more at once with a full countertop caddy, I like to add half the caddy, maybe, layer in some Bokashi bran, and then add in the second half, layering in some more. Maybe even if my tamper is handy, tamping things down every time I add a layer, just to make sure all scraps are good and compressed, and that there's great contact between the food scraps and the Bokashi bran. Then, like with the sealer for the Organco bin, it's important to compress the scraps with that tamper, right? To reduce any potential air pockets. And this is why you'll want, you know, something that you don't have to use your hand or get too close to those food scraps. If you don't mind getting a little messy that way, that's totally fine. But if you prefer to avoid that, then it's nice to have something of a tool handy to keep your hand out of the bin. When finished, adding anything, seal your bucket and ensure it's airtight. This really is the only way that you can screw up the process. On to step 2. Fill the bin and let it sit. So plan to set it aside, maybe in your garage, the side of your house, for roughly 14 to 21 days. If you forget your bin and let it sit a little bit longer, no problem. I've done that countless times. Step number 3, Bokashi juice. If using a bin with a spout like the Organco, it's recommended to check for and empty your Bokashi juice every few days. That's roughly 2 to 3 days. If left sitting long enough, it could potentially putrefy. So from the process of fermentation, there is a lot of moisture being created, and that we want to release ideally from the bottom of the bucket. If you are using a 5-gallon bucket, this is why we're adding some more things like cardboard or paper towel rolls just so that I can absorb a bit of that extra moisture, and the moisture isn't accumulating at the bottom and putrefying. You can empty those juices into a watering can and add some water, roughly 100 to 1. Bokashi is pretty strong, and you can fertilize your plants. Or, believe it or not, you can just drain the Bokashi juice down your drain, because Bokashi juice clears drain sludge. Seriously. And while your first bin is sitting aside, rotate it in an extra bin and work on filling that up too. Step number 4, check your bin after roughly 14 to 21 days. We'll open it for the first time to see how things look. Here's a little bit of an idea of what you might see in smell. First, white mold and vinegar smell. This is perfect. That's what we want. This indicates that our fermentation has taken place. Otherwise, you might see nothing. Things look the same. That's fine too. All this means is that we might need to take more time or add more liquidy additions to help support the fermentation process. Finally, you might see something like black mold and smell a putrid smell. This means things went rancid. This has rarely ever happened to me. The advice I've received here is to just bury this as soon as possible, maybe deeper than normal, and add more Bokashi to the top layer before covering it up with soil. It's not so bad. But let's do a couple of live looks at the bins of my own that I've been storing to share with you. Let's take a look at a couple buckets here that I've had sitting for not just weeks, but maybe upwards of a month or over a month. Let's see. Ooh, that is some really good white mold. That's exactly what we're looking for. I can smell it too, quite vinegary and ready to go into the ground, no question. So this bin here is from the Organco, I guess premium bin as I've been calling it, but this has this sealer here. This has been sitting for maybe about 3 weeks at this point. So let's take a look at this one and see what we got going on. So there we go. Looks like we got some white mold going on there. Not a huge amount of change, but certainly some good signs with the white mold as well. You can't smell it on the video, but I'm getting some vinegary smell there. So I'd say that this is ready to go into the dirt. This bucket, just, you know, one of the classic Home Depot buckets, is one also that I feel like I sometimes have problems getting completely airtight. So let's see. And this one's been sitting for a long time, maybe even a couple months. See if anything looks awry. Let's see. Not much change here. A little bit of white mold creeping in there. I've looked at this before, maybe in the last few weeks. Saw no change. Definitely a vinegary smell, however. And so all that being considered, I think I'd still get this into the dirt, especially just knowing how long this has been here. Okay, next up, we need to add our fermented scraps to a soil ecosystem. Let's go ahead and head outside. Okay. If you're digging a hole in your yard or garden, make sure to dig the hole deep enough to be able to cover your pre-compost with roughly 6 inches of mulching material or soil. I like to use oak leaves because we have tons of oak leaves here with our live oak tree canopy. Alternatively, you can also dig multiple more shallow holes if digging deep holes in your soil is rather difficult. I started a hole here for the purposes of a soil test earlier this week, so I'm just going to expand this hole here. Hole is dug, and now it's time to add in the food scraps. I typically like to add some of the fermented scraps, add some soil on top of it, add some more scraps, and continue to layer until the bucket is empty. So let's go ahead and tackle that. Put some scraps in there, add some soil. I usually like to use a cultivator or something like this to just kind of tamp things down to make the most of the hole that I dug. More scraps, more soil in there, tamp it down. And then, let's see, boom. All right, get that all in there. Tamp it all in, could add even more soil, because this is exactly what you want at this point. Now there's about still a solid 6 inches, maybe a little bit more, between the scraps, the soil, and the ground. So at this point, I will go and grab some wood chip mulch from elsewhere on my property to throw on top. All right, finally, just grab some wood chips from a heap of scraps we have to top off this pile and finish things out. Add some of that soil back in, keep things as level as you like with the ground. I should say that this is the future spot of a market style garden for us, so I'm not too worried about tearing up holes in our yard. So just know that if you're trying to preserve whatever your yard is, I wouldn't recommend digging holes right directly in it. So now with this hole dug, the scraps, fermented scraps dumped in it, we're gonna wait for roughly 4 to 6 weeks, and at that point we should have compost underneath here. Last thing I would do is hose out this bin here and leave it to dry in the sun for a bit. That would finish this process. So we'll go ahead and head back inside to talk troubleshooting, Bokashi composting, and wrap up with why specifically Bokashi composting is my chosen method, and as well as some potential drawbacks as you go through Bokashi composting yourself. Let's head inside. I mentioned this before, but the most common reason that Bokashi fermentation fails is too much exposure to oxygen. So open your bucket or bin as infrequently as you can and make sure it is sealed airtight. Beyond that, the next reason for failure is too little Bokashi brand contact. So make sure that with each addition of food scraps, there's good contact for everything with the Bokashi brand. This is another reason why I like the Organco more than a 5-gallon bucket, just because you're adding small amounts of food scraps and small amounts of brand more frequently. And finally, when you go to bury your fermented scraps, dig them a bit deeper than you think. The only time I've ever had any issues with pests, just ants or maggots, were our dogs. It's when I didn't dig the fermented food scraps in deep enough. And my hunch is also that my fermentation wasn't completely finished, which harks back to the point of ensuring good brand contact. This made it more enticing to be dug up by someone. We'll finish up by addressing here why I like Bokashi composting versus other methods. And first, it's because you can compost anything. Bokashi's major benefit to me is that the rules of what you can compost are so much simpler. Dairy, oily foods, and meats, those are all things you can throw into the Bokashi system. As well as you get compost pretty fast. Depending on how long it takes you to fill your bin, after roughly that 2 to 3 week fermentation period, then 4 to 6 weeks added to a compost system or directly into the ground, the compost should be able to be planted on top of or able to be added to your garden elsewhere. As well, Bokashi composting is hard to mess up, so the margin for error for Bokashi composting is high. Chop up your scraps, keep them compacted in your bin, make sure the bin is airtight, and add healthy dosings of bran each time. Very simple, in my opinion. And as well, if you've ever heard of anything like your browns to greens ratio, you don't have to think so hard about that with Bokashi composting. That's not really relevant with the Bokashi fermentation process. And next, Bokashi fermentation actually becomes a pest repellent. So fermenting your food scraps first makes them repellent to pests or rodents when you then move them to an outdoor system or dig them into the ground. So dig them deep enough, mix with enough soil and mulch, and you won't have a problem. Then there's the bonuses. So if you decide to use a premium Bokashi bin, like the Organco, you'll have a spout built in where you can drain the Bokashi juice every few days. This juice mixed with water, at least 100-to-1 ratio, is a valuable fertilizer to give to your plants. Also, as I briefly mentioned before, it can be drained right into the sink. It actually helps clear your pipes. Okay, here's a few cons or drawbacks of Bokashi composting. First, digging holes. I've dug a lot of holes in our yard. Digging holes is pretty hard, and where possible, I would love to save that energy for planting trees or building water retention berms. But there are ways to minimize this. Like I said, maybe working into an existing compost bin. It's not as hard to dig into there and mix things up. Or, if you want to dig multiple small holes, depending on the type of soil you have, that is another potential workaround. Also, Bokashi can be a little messy. Bokashi composting isn't the messiest method of composting that I've done, but it can get there. So limit the mess by using a tamper to compress your scraps if you're using a 5-gallon bucket, or of course the seal with a premium bin like this. And make sure to get a good hose attachment if you don't already have one to clean your bucket after you empty your fermented scraps a few weeks after filling your bin. Lastly, there's the brand. So to Bokashi compost, you do need Bokashi brand. It's impossible to do it without it. And that requires that you need to keep buying brand or make your own. I haven't made my own, not sure if it's worth the effort from what I've read so far, but I'm out about 90 bucks every 6 months or so for new brand when I pick up a big refill like this. All right, y'all, this was my complete tutorial to Bokashi composting. If you have more questions, want more details and further resources, be sure to leave a comment below or check out the accompanying post at growensemble.com. And also, please share your experience with Bokashi composting if you give it a shot. Lastly, be sure to sign up for my newsletter where each week we explore the art of living and working sustainably at the intersection of business, nature, and philosophy. So go to growensemble.com/newsletter to be the first to get more tutorials just like this.